Welcome to the Sheffield Sunday As Bill Sees It meeting. This is a main share meeting, and today it is with great pleasure and much gratitude that we welcome Chris C. from Texas, who's come to share for about 40 minutes, after which we'll open up for general sharing or if you'd like to ask a question. Thank you, Chris. It's wonderful to have you here, and the floor is yours.
Thank you, Andrew, and thank you, As Bill Sees It Sunday afternoon meeting of Alcoholics Anonymous in Sheffield. Sheffield. I'm going to say it wrong. I'm going to get a lot of things wrong today, but hopefully not about the truth around the program of Alcoholics Anonymous. And I'm just sitting here today feeling remember whens, getting sober in Ontario. There was a meeting called the Good Shepherd, and the Scottish guys would meet there, and they'd let some of their friends from England, and they'd all plead things. So they did the whole Friday night meeting. It was just so much fun, fellowship. We're going to let this Irishman in here, and it was like us, regular English speaking Canadians would just sit there laughing. They said they came over to Canada. They saw a sign that said drink Canada dry. And so they all tried. And so that was a wonderful meeting to go to and get sober in. And today I'm getting some beautiful remember whens of just, there's not enough accents in Texas. There's a different accent. Here they say I have an accent, and I say, no, y'all have an accent. Y'all do. And that's the deal, everyone from other places, and, the way we speak. And in Alcoholics Anonymous, we have a common illness, a common solution. And so I'm so grateful to be asked to come and share today. And Mary, thank you for reading that. Young, thanks for asking me to come. I've been sober since December 2nd, 2004. And I'm so grateful to be able to say that today. I'm grateful to say that I was able to continue to stay sober over some of the stuff I pulled in early recovery, and I just didn't take that first drink and did some action, took a different action as opposed to picking up a drink. And my home group is the 164 group here in Wimberley. We meet Friday nights in Wimberley at the Presbyterian Church. Y'all are welcome. I say y'all now. It starts to get on you when you're here. So I say y'all A. I put those together, and that gets a lot done for me. So today's reading, this past year and into last year, emotional sobriety is something that I've been directed to by my sponsor. And I guess I should just kind of qualify, like I said, I got sober in 2004. I've grown up in the program of Alcoholics Anonymous. And so to grow up, the first few years, and it's been taught to me that, the first 3 steps, we give up 3 to 9. I grow up, hopefully, and 10 to 12, I show up, and I start to show up for the other alcoholic, my family, the people in my community, and I start practicing this way of life. And, the way I drank, and I know I drank the same as you. I thought the same as you. That's why I'm here. I didn't plan on being a, long timer in Alcoholics Anonymous. And when I didn't, and I sure as heck didn't think I was going to be successful over a long period of time. But the 12 steps work. The 12 traditions work. Sponsorship works. And it works when I work it. And so, sober in Ontario, 28 years old, I grew up in alcoholism. I had some behavioral stuff too. I came in here with some other stuff. My first sponsor would say, we all come here with our own things, and some have better skills than others, and that kind of thing. And so she'd point that out. But I pretty much raised myself and raised my family. And I did a poor job of it. I did a pitiful job. And I continued to try to do that throughout my life, making demands on people. One of my notes I've written down here, the 3 Ds. I've been going more to some retreats and conferences. I've gotten more into Alcoholics Anonymous in my later years, and I can explain what happened there. But the 3 Ds, dominance, dependence, and demand, in this reading, Bill's talking about. And so what happened is, fast forward, I'm sober a while. I moved to Texas. I found this really sweet fella that hasn't found it necessary to divorce me or deport me. And here we are, he was in a depression. I was in a rage when we got together, and it was just like, okay, God, let's see what you got. And, I came here with a really no belief in any kind of God. I had some very distorted beliefs around it. I had some beliefs from my father and his resentment towards things. And it took a long time for me to really get a relationship with a higher power that works for me. And it, early days of sobriety was just trying to stay sober and trying to clean up the messes I kept continuing to make because I was so immature, because I was so insecure. And because I would make these choices based on, my adolescent urges. And so, I moved to Texas and I started to straighten out mentally and physically a little bit and do some deeper work. And I, my early sobriety, and I consider like my first 15 years my early sobriety, and maybe now even I can add these next 5. I had enough space where I learned how to live sober, life was going, and now it's like, okay, now what? I've got to do this graduate work, as some people have put it, or, this spiritual work, this emotional work. And, I haven't had a lot of outside therapy. I haven't sought that, and I don't need to get into any of that. And I know it's probably because I just haven't valued myself enough to go and do it and spend the money on that. But on Alcoholics Anonymous, I've been able to find, through the 12 steps, through inventory, through staying connected with a higher power and helping others, I've straightened out mentally and physically. And then, I went on to about 19 years of sobriety. And, I was visiting our family group in town here because they were more structured. I like the structure. And as much as I was such an outlaw rebel all the time, like it turns out I really like structure, kind of understand that. Tell me what's going on. And Young Lee's done I keep calling him Young Lee. Young has done a great job of giving me the structure for this. And I understood what to do, and I understand the assignment to the best of my ability. So I was in this beautiful house here with this wonderful man who loves me, and there's no abuse in the home. I've broken that cycle, through the work. And I'm standing in the kitchen, and I say, in myself first, of course, always trying to talk to myself first. Hey, maybe I'm just, maybe I'm not an alcoholic. Okay, first of all, I had stacks of beer cases. I had gin bottles stacked up like they were an art installation in my house. Okay, like it was in the back mudroom. Like it was because I didn't have a vehicle to get them removed, and I didn't want to put them on the street. So that was my solution: just make a new wall. And so that's not a social drinker, And so 19 years, they know that the insanity of the drink returns. The insanity of the first drink. I haven't had it yet, but it's I think I'm going to see it coming. And so, then I said it to Adam, and he just goes, "Oh, interesting." I'm like, okay. And so then I called someone back home in Canada who I trust very much and told him the truth. And he said a few things. I want you to join that group your husband started. We're studying the big book. And I want you to ask that woman you keep talking about to be your sponsor. And I immediately went into rationalization and justification, And he goes, okay, I don't remember asking you a question. If you want to overcome this problem, I don't believe this is a question, Chris. These are things you're going to do if you want to get over this. I think I'm going to see it coming. And so I get with this sponsorship group, and they're all incredible. And they're calling themselves neurotics. And I was like, wow, that's what it is. Like all these years I haven't figured. I love it. I found my people. And so, I get into some trouble with my sponsor. I'm placing demands. I didn't really think I was, I'm not going to tell the truth that, I am lacking in spiritual development. And she's not afraid to point that out. What I need to find here, is an alcoholic who's armed with the facts of their alcoholism, who's uniquely qualified to help me with my problem. And in that moment, when I was at the precipice of a drink, because that's really where I was. That's no joke, but I was, it really looks that's why it's so cunning, baffling, and powerful. Going to meetings, sponsoring women, being of service, still, having maybe meeting-based sobriety. That's what I could say it was. I wasn't doing a regular inventory. I wasn't, I had this nice lady at the time I was talking to once a week about whatever. but I wasn't really treating my alcoholism. I like that you guys want to talk about how we treat our alcoholism. And so it snuck up on me again. And thankfully I didn't take a drink. But what I did was I took some action. I took the actions I didn't want to take. I made those changes and I got involved. And then, I went to a retreat, and I'm not trying to minimize, but like for me is if I have a disagreement with someone and I don't put them through the door opening or the wall, in my mind, I feel like I'm just quite a lady, like I am just killing it. And I'm, my old way would be burn it down, freak everyone out, cause a huge drama. And instead there was a disturbance, and I hadn't brought it to my sponsor. And talk about the immaturity and the lack of, and she pointed out, she says, Chris, it's really unrealistic that you had a problem with this person last year. And this is the first time I'm hearing about it. So we came to understand that I love to litigate. And she goes, it sounds like you're just explaining, she says her sponsor's going to die of lack of over explanation, and she is going to die of it. And I'm also going to die of it if I don't, take some action around it. And so I said to her, first of all, I did a good inventory, and she has it's the same one in the big book, but she goes a little deeper, and she asks, how does this resentment affect my relationship with the person in column 1, affect my relationship with others, and how does it affect my relationship with God? And it's a deeper look at the resentment and then deeper, the 6 manifestations of self-delusion, self-pity, self-seeking, self-righteous, and self, I could go on. I'm not here for that, but just get some stuff wrong. So I did a deep inventory around this immaturity and this disturbance. That's all it was. It was a disturbance that I was unwilling to look at. And it caused trouble the next year. And so I made amends to that beautiful lady. She's fantastic, and I'm not trying to say it was just a small disturbance. I took on somebody else's stuff. I'm going to do that. I'm selfish and self-centered, and that's what I do. I make it about me, and then I make it weird. I make it weird. And so, I did the inventory on that. And then I asked my sponsor, after, making the amends, I asked my sponsor, what can I do here, to further grow? And she said, I want you to read Emotional Sobriety for 30 days. I want you to really read it. And so I did and studied it. I wake up in my morning meditation, and I would pull this out of, Language of the Heart. If you don't know where it is, it's an article that Bill wrote in his 20s of sobriety, where he was deeply depressed. And I studied it in the morning, and I, along with my 60 to 63, I like to read a deep third step in the morning. And when I do it, okay, because I am not doing it perfectly all the time. Not here to tell you I'm doing better than I am, because I'm just not. So by studying it, and it really outlines, when it comes back to that, I got to get my little season open, but the spiritual immaturity and the lack of spiritual development, and those teenage desires for too much prestige, love, and protection, and all of that stuff. I can get sober, I can work my steps, and then I get in the day, and then there you guys are, and there I am. And how am I showing up there in those relationships? How am I showing up in my familial relationships, my husband, my people back home in Canada? The people at my home group, the people at the grocery store. Am I truly growing up, or am I just saying I am, or deluding myself and trying to manipulate myself? A lot of the time I'm out to, when I'm in my illness, I could be manipulating you, but I got to start somewhere. And I start with myself. I'm going to lie to myself. Delusion is the lie I tell myself. Self-delusion. It's the lie I tell myself about any situation. I'm going to start telling lies, so that I can make you the bad guy, I can make you the fall guy, and then I can come for you, and then I can be justified in it. Oof, how exhausting is that? And how insane, how crazy. So through the study of emotional sobriety, the next frontier, and spending, and God is so funny. My sponsor goes away for like a month. And here I am, a good little student studying away, growing up. And it was wonderful. I could talk to her about it. I had a spiritual experience with that. I had some spiritual growth, and it's changed the relationship. I can talk to her today, where before I was intimidated and afraid to talk to my sponsor. She sponsors a lot of people. She's the right sponsor for me. She's not just her, the network of alcoholics around her, my sponsorship family, they're all uniquely qualified to help me. And I'm afraid of them, at times. And how do I show up in here? And one of them was so funny. He said, I come in there, I'm crying about, I'm just, so terrible. I thought about a drink at 19 years. And after about 6 months, he's like, okay, girl, we need some new material. Okay, let's go. Like, give us something else in here. What else is going on? And so, to grow up, it's painful to grow, but it's painful not to grow. To sit in, right now I'm dealing with some stuff where I'm just not, my sponsor called me on it this week in a nice way. She just like, what's that about, Chris? Why aren't you taking that action? You said you were going to do it. You have a problem. You have the reality in front of you of what the situation is, but you're unwilling to go forward. And I said, well, I think it's defiance. And she goes, yeah, okay. And I said, I think it's pride. And then she goes, yeah, but I think there's something else. And it's fear, and it's the chief activator. And, and she told me if I'm fearful about something, I'm not going to do anything. I'm not going to move. I'm going to freeze. And that's where I'm at. With this particular situation. So I need God's help, this higher power that I've now built this great relationship with that wants to help me with my problem. Do I want to ask God to help me? Am I trusting and relying on God? Am I willing to give this power, all of it, not just the drink, not just a few things, all of me in that 7th step. Am I willing to give the good and the bad? Am I willing? And what does that look like? And I got to get clear about that. I've got to find out what is driving me. What motive is underneath. And when I can get honest about that, then that's where the work begins. Like, that's when the rubber meets the road. That's when, I heard this one, and it was so sweet. I love my sponsorship network. She's working with this new gal at this retreat, and the gal goes, I'm really good on paper, and I'm really good. And there's my sponsee sister goes, okay, let's start with the truth. Let's start with the truth. Okay. You made it to AA. Okay. You're not an award-winning actress, like you're an Alcoholics Anonymous. And there's nothing bad about that, but let's start with the truth. If I've been taking it whenever I want to be delusional about something, I go, okay, Chris, let's start with the truth. What is the truth, And I need help to see that sometimes. And so, trying to solve a spiritual problem with with material things, with people, with prestige, with your approval. If you just think I'm fantastic, then I must be fantastic. And then what happens when you go away? You're not telling me I'm fantastic anymore. And I got to live with the guy that's still in my head telling me all this stuff about myself. The selfish and self-centeredness of this alcoholic will take me away from you, separate me from God, separate me from you, and separate me from the new person who's coming in the rooms. I'm not very useful. If I'm full of Chris, I need less Chris, more God. Less Chris, more God. Less self, more God. That's what I need. And I got to get to this emotional sobriety, I got to tether or I'm going to flee. That's something I learned in this workshop I was in. I got to tether. And so I got to get with this higher power and say, okay, listen, this is turning me inside out and I need some help with it. And, it's a practice of humility, right? It's once you say you have it, you don't have it. And for me, it's just being able to say, I don't know. I'm afraid of this. What is your experience with it? Do you have any experience? Can you help me? Asking for help over and over and over and over again, and being willing to take the actions that I don't want to take. And so through doing that over and over and over and over again, I've grown up. We were in my home group. We just studied, step 11, we pause when agitated or doubtful. I was saying I had no pause. I was 70 streets ahead and I was ready for a 10th step my whole life. Oh, I'll just stick to the 10th step. That's not how that works, guys. Like if you're new in the program, it got me by, but people were just like, I'm not going to be your roadkill. Like, you're not going to take me as a hostage. And so, oh good. Is this my timer for how much time is left, or should I guess I shouldn't, I've had 20 minutes, but have I been speaking for 20? Or just, give me a hands up, like, yeah, okay. Well, I'm not going to take all that time because I can't stand that much of me. You know what I mean? Like, I want to hear from y'all. But I think that if I don't do this work, let me rephrase that. I know that if I hadn't have gotten into the program with enthusiasm again and done some hard things, difficult things, scary things, join a group of, like I sit in my tradition, we studied the traditions and relationships together. And I'm listening to these guys talk and I'm going, oh, these guys are actually working a program. They really know what they're doing in here. And I think, oh, I got nothing to, like, just so much self-pity, so much self, sitting in there going. And then the other day, one of the ones I respect so much, she comes to me and she says, Chris, every time you share, I get on what you're saying. And then I forget what I was going to say. And you really hit every point that it's just like, if I share from language of the heart, I'm going to reach the heart, and some of my, God bless my little network. I mean, they're pretty clever. They're all type A's. I'm sitting in there. I'm the only left-handed artist in the place. And I know my sponsor likes to keep it fresh in there. And so, it doesn't matter. Like, I'm learning from them. And I'm having this experience of getting excited again about the material, getting excited about inventory. What? Who said that? Not this girl, Getting excited about daily review or nightly review. I do mine in the morning when I do it. And, my sponsor loves to talk about treating it as though, it's, I'm asking God to show me where I've been selfish, where I've been resentful. Do I owe an apology? Am I afraid? Please show me, God. Please show me where I've been. Please show me where have I been packing into the stream of life. Please show me, if I've been helpful and useful. And then I ask God for forgiveness for the separation that I've created. This is handed down directly from my sponsorship. And, I said, it says we ask for forgiveness. We see if there's anything, I need to make right. And she goes, yeah. And I like to ask God for forgiveness for the separation that I've created because I'm creating it. I'm creating it with my emotional inebriety or my sobriety. I'm creating it with my complacency and all the things, right? And so, when I feel like, and I write that in my daily review at the end, please forgive me for the separation that I've created, because I want to remember every minute, like whenever I can, that I am creating this separation. I'm never separate from God. God is within me. It's a source I can tap into anytime I want. It's an illusion to think that I am separated. My ego wants to separate me from that and then separate me from you. And then I get all kinds of sick. And so, I wrote down that the childless toddler, I guess I should spend a little more time just reading or talking about this, but I like what he writes in the 12 and 12 later on, and something else that I'd love to touch on, and it's in emotional sobriety, and it's on the second page of that essay on 238. And he says, this seems to be the primary healing circuit, an outgoing love of God's creation and his people, by means of which we avail ourselves of his love for us. It is most clear that the real current can't flow unless the paralyzing dependencies are broken, and broken at depth. Only then can we possibly have a glimmer of what adult love really is. And, because I didn't, I had a very distorted idea of what love is. I grew up where there was a lack and like a lot of us. And that's not an excuse. I don't get to be a victim of that. My mom was put in a mental institution. My dad raised 3 kids. He was 26. There was a 6-year-old, a 4-year-old, a 1-year-old. He did the best he could with what he had. He was a single father. He was the first father in Ontario to receive child support. He had to fight for that, back then in the olden days. For me, anyway, listen, anyone with grayer hair than I color it. But anyway, excuse my cheekiness. But, there was a lot of dysfunction in the home. And I took that into life. And so love, what is adult love? I want to, the more love I give, the more I'm filled with love. It's not the other way around. I think I need all this love. You need to love on me. And I did that in my early sobriety. And this one lady, you guys just say this stuff and just really break my heart, with the truth. They say the truth will set you free, but first it will piss you off, and that's been my experience with the truth. And she said, Chris, at some point you have to start nurturing yourself. I thought, how rude are you? Everyone's been just so compassionate to me. And she was right. I had to go and nurture myself, and find out what that love looked like so I could practice it with myself, so I could practice it with you. And, the more I love, the more I'm filled with love. The more I forgive, the more peace I have. My sponsor said that one day. I wrote it on my fridge. I'm back to writing stuff and putting it on my fridge again. That's what I used to do in because that's where I'm around the kitchen a lot, right? So I can see it there. And if I meditate on that, and then I actually practice that, because meditating on that is just wonderful. Just sit alone and with your coffee, just have a great old time thinking about all this stuff. But it's like, am I out in the world doing that thing? Am I truly loving? Am I loving the one that's not maybe a little more unlovable? Am I spending time at the home group, not just with my friends, or my little group is really, really small. So if you're avoiding someone, it's going to stand out. But the meeting I go to in town, there's a lot of really great friends of mine there. There's a lot of newcomers there. There are a lot of people there checking out the meeting. Am I going over to them? Am I saying hello to them? Or am I just staying with my little pod of people that's comfortable for me? Because I love my little Tuesday night meeting, So how am I showing up with this love, this love? And am I showing other women, other people about this thing? Am I sharing that with them? So, this was an interesting topic for me today, because I've gone on and it was pointed out by my other mentor that I should read the other articles that Bill wrote. He was going to write another book, and he never got a chance. And that's written in the language of the heart. You can read that before these essays. But Take Step 11 is also beautiful. And there's just so much help in the literature. Imagine that. I had my big book and I would read that, and I'd read the 12 and 12 if we were studying it. But now I get these books in my hands and I want to read them because they have the answers, to what ails me. And they have the answers to what I can do about my problem and, how I can go about it. And I end up in the solution, and then I end up being more useful and having a purpose and less self, more you. We talked about having the cart before the horse. Oh my gosh. Forget it. I was always 5,000 steps ahead and still could be, this, they say, and you can't think your way into good living. I got to live my way into right thinking. And that's, all these things that you guys would say and that people would say and the old timers would say in the meeting. And I'd just be like, 29, 30, 32, okay, that's trite. That's some, sing-song stuff. And it's true. It's all true, and I love that he's like, hey, this isn't going to serve you at 49 years old, Chris. Are you going to grow up? Come on now, let's go. And I'm so glad I have some, I found that group and I have that access. And am I, as I go, am I going to start to create that in my own little town? I have our little home group and I try to share it there to the best of my ability, just to be an example, just to carry that message. The message of the 12 steps, of course, but just the message of, hey, get excited about sobriety. Excited to come to the meeting. Now, listen, it was a little touch and go over here that I was going to make it on time. I almost set like every alarm. I'm not a morning person. Once I wake up though, like she's awake, you know, my friend goes, she wakes up like a Pop-Tart, but, and that's not always great for y'all that don't want to talk in the morning. You know, I get it. I have to see maturity, like understanding and having consideration. My husband likes his quiet time. He doesn't want his like, not lady coming down the hall just with all the jobs for the day, you know. And I've learned how to have consideration for him. And so it was funny today. It was just a little bit of a gong show. We have a couple dogs. I have a blue heeler that's more neurotic than his mama. And he is just like, something's happening. You know, y'all are waking up. I want to be fed. I want to be walked. Like all these things that are 2 hours earlier for him than the songwriters. Adam and I are both musicians. Is like, he's up early, but I'm more of like a 7:30 girl, you know. I'm coming to, if I can get some better sleep, I feel better in my day. But because the other thing I made a mistake of is that I thought it was Eastern time. So the other day I looked, thank goodness I figured that one out, because I would have been logging in an hour late. I just like to laugh at myself too, not take myself so seriously, you know, and I can still be childlike. I can still have fun. I can still be playful, but not at your expense, you know, not at the expense of the relationship. You know, I'm so grateful that I had that disturbance at that. It was nothing huge. It was just, I got honest with my sponsor. I said, listen, I don't like the way I showed up here. I could have done a better job. And that's it. She's like, yeah, you could do a better job. You know, we all can do a better job. And so, I cleaned it up with that other gal, and I'm excited. We have our sponsorship retreat coming up in September, and it's intense. We go through the 12 steps together. It's beautiful. We're there for 4 days with each other. They come from all over the place. We have one coming from England. You know, he's a American that lives in the UK, and he comes over for the retreat, and we have them coming from New York and California. And it's just beyond my wildest dreams that on this new design, you know, or it's the same thing. It's just, these are people that are actually treating their alcoholism, you know, gathering together, to study and to grow in their understanding and effectiveness of where they're at in their sobriety. And we're all kind of long timers that found her, you know, we were a little bit dry and crispy. And then, we get in there with her and study, and she's just an alcoholic, you know, I know that. But she has a great hold of the program, and her other old timers around her. There's several of them that kind of lead our sponsorship groups and stuff. So, what a gift that is to be 21 years sober and to found a schoolhouse again, because I wasn't, you know, I have to seek this thing. If the meeting, you know, the meetings in my town aren't serving, because they weren't for a minute, you know. One of my friends calls it an open destruction meeting. And it's just what was going on. I was like, oh, one other one calls it flat tire, dead cat meeting. You know, it's like, oh, you know, like if I could you can stay sober on that. I want to be around people that are studying this deal and actually practicing it, treating their alcoholism. Because if I don't, I can get pretty sick, you know, and it's not a judgment on them, because I'm complacent. I wasn't willing to travel, or I didn't know where they were. They were only 40 miles down the road from me. There was this pocket of alcoholics, and what she's doing is she's trying to get us. She's like, we're raising sponsors here, Chris. This is what we're doing. We're getting everybody on track, so you can go out and be of service in the hospitals and institutions, you know, in the jails. Everyone in my sponsorship network are deeply into service in some way or another, and that's a place to grow and to mature. You know, that maturity. Because, I mean, if I'm always falling apart and I got this gal on the phone, she's going to be like, you know, you better get a different program. You know, you better do a little bit of work. You know, you're always in trouble. And so, you know, I want, what kind of an example am I setting, you know, to be a maximum usefulness to my fellows and not just alcoholics, you know, anyone in my sphere that I get to connect with, the gal at the grocery store, you know, got something going on that I can be useful to, because I'm not stuck in self. I can see if God has a place for me to be useful, you know, and what a beautiful way to live that is, you know, you guys said, okay, we're going to help you with your drinking. and maybe we'll help you a little bit with your thinking. Okay. I mean, you're a tough case. We'll see. And now it's like, wow, you've helped me with my living, my living, like who Chris really is. I found out who I am, and what I'm capable of because of you guys, and the program of Alcoholics Anonymous. And now, we have this beautiful life here. It's tricky. I'm foot dragging on getting some more income, and I'm getting as honest as I can be about that. But we're writing great songs, we're playing music. We get to travel around and bring people joy and get to perform I get to sing, play music, play mandolin and guitar and do that with the man I love. I mean, what? When I was a little street kid, not 28 years old, I always referred to myself as some kind of kid. God, you were not a kid. But, to see the growth that's happened for me. And I have a lot of compassion for the young woman coming into AA who was not only alcoholic, had some other things going on, that didn't have a lot of familial support. No judgment against them. They didn't have it to give. And had to find my way and make the mistakes. And, if you're in the program and you're new and you're going along and you're thinking, oh, that gal must be doing it good over there, or that one's doing great over there and I'm struggling. Well, guess what? You're staying sober. And if I was nuttier than a, mouse. Okay. I've done it all. I went to the psych ward at 2 years. I said, call my sponsor. Anyway, I was just like, they were like, who? You're in the psychiatric ward, Chris. Like, do you understand? I'm like, yeah, but I don't belong here. And they're like, well, you're having a hard time. And so you don't have to do that. I had some other stuff going on. I had some other struggles. And so, and don't we all, right? It's like, I'm a garden variety drunk. I have emotional disturbance. I have spiritual immaturity. I lack spiritual development. Well, the good news is that, guess what? There's a solution. Hey, work on that spirituality a little bit. Work on that connection with God. The good news is if I have lack of spiritual development is that I can develop. I've seen it work in every other area in my life. I've watched it. I've worked it. And so I'm excited to see, that's the thing. I think excitement and enthusiasm for the program, and digging in and just always being teachable and wanting to grow and understanding and effectiveness, and so that I can be maximum use, is just a cool deal. Like, I'm like, great, cool. I've gotten old here. Oh, listen, I'm the oldest I've ever been. And my mother-in-law reminded me, and she goes, you're the youngest you'll ever be. And we're working on I told her I'll write her a little song with that one. But, I've gotten older here. I was 28. I'm 49. I'm going to be 50 in October. I didn't think I was going to live past 30. I was trying not to. I was trying not to be around, and then I got sober. I went, ooh, I want to live. I went to the other extreme. Oh my gosh, what if I die? What happens? Now I'm at the phase of like, okay, well, we're all going to do that. So what does that look like? And can I think about that without turning inside out? And God's going to help me with that as I grow, as I get older, and hopefully I get a chance to get older. Like I loved at the beginning of your meeting, some of us don't make it. I've buried a lot of friends in this program. I've watched people long time sobriety, at that juncture that I was at 19 years, they took a different path, and I don't want to take that path. I want to grow up here. I want to grow here and I want to stay here. And y'all are my people. I just love all y'all. I don't even know you, but I have a song we wrote called Love You Already. And I love you already, and that's the deal with this program. So, thank you so much, Young, for asking me to come and speak. I'm so glad that I made sure to be here on Wake, and I hope to hear what y'all have to share. Thank you very, very much for listening so intently. I know you had no choice because you were muted, but I do appreciate you, and I hope you go out in the day and have a good one. And if you don't, you know what to do. You've got some sponsorship and some program and material to read, and what a gift it is that we have all this help. Thank you so much.